forget to rate our show and subscribe.
Before we begin this podcast, if you or someone you know is in crisis or needs emotional support, there are tools that can help. So get yourself a pen and paper or open a note-taking app on your phone or computer. Feel free to pause this episode while you get yourself ready. The episode starts at 1 minute and 52 seconds. You can call Talk Suicide Canada at 1-833-456-4566. You can text 45645, which is coming in the fall of 2023. In Canada, you can also call 988, the Kids Help Phone at 1-800-668-6868. The Trans Lifeline in Canada is 1-877-330-6366. And in the United States, 1-877-565-8860, or call 911. You are not alone, and you do not have to be alone. I would like to honor and recognize the traditional and unceded territories of the Katzie, Kwantlen, and Semiahmoo nations on whose territory I live, work, and play. Welcome to We Are the ADHD Family podcast. This podcast is meant to chronicle our journey with ADHD, autism, and other discoveries along the way. I reach out to advocates, experts, individuals, and other families that want to raise their voices and empower those on their journey. My name is Mark Smeets, and I am passionate about removing barriers for others through creating connections and building on strengths and practical problem solving. I am married to Siobhan, a parent of 2 wonderful kids, and all of us have ADHD. I want you to feel like you have power and hope. And now, into the episode. One of the things that we love about Owen is how literal he is. There was a joke that we used to say to him that he would never understand. He does now, so he catches it. But we would tell him, "Hey Owen, can you hold your horses?" And then he'd go, "I don't have any horses, Dad." Now when we try to tell him this joke, he just catches us and he's like, "That doesn't work on me anymore." Owen, I want to ask you some questions about grade 2.
Okay.
When there was something that you didn't understand, did she take the time to teach you and try different ways of learning?
Maybe.
Is that because you say maybe because you don't remember?
Yep.
Okay. Mackenzie, I have questions about school for you in kindergarten. Are you ready? What did you like best about kindergarten?
Playing outside with the grade 1s.
Did your teacher figure out things that you liked? You're nodding your head, but are you saying yes?
Yes.
Yes. If there was something that you didn't understand, did she try and help you figure out different ways of learning it?
Yes.
And how did that make you feel?
Happy.
Did she ever try and make you learn something that ever made you uncomfortable?
No.
I wanted to start the episode with that little clip of Owen. I promise you that Owen remembers. He seems to be fixated on the bad experiences from grade 2 when I asked him this morning, and he also had a really long sleep, so maybe he just wasn't totally ready to dive in and be his chatty little self. One small thing to note is my special guest today was only his teacher for part of grade 2. She ended up having to leave to attend to family issues. When she left, it devastated O. It was almost like losing a limb. My wife and I had to forge a new relationship with a new teacher, and she was wonderful. We love her too. But O struggled in the class because it was rough. And he also struggled because, he's at a different development level than everybody else. And that makes it hard. But the impact that Melissa had on him was profound in that short period of time that they were together. And it's interesting because when you have a child that is autistic or has a disability, and they form a relationship with a teacher or an EA, losing that unexpected, continuous, and constant support person can be devastating. And I know that's one common problem I've heard of in schools up here. You also heard Mackenzie in that clip, and what you couldn't see was that she was answering every question with a shrug of her shoulders. So I had to try to have her use more words since obviously you can't see us, and you can't see how she's answering. Mackenzie also had multiple teachers for kindergarten at one point this year, and both of them were absolutely wonderful. They were open to hearing things, and they didn't throw things at me or run away from me if I had questions. So I will end by saying, please value your teachers, value the experience that they bring. They are here to help, and don't be afraid to be the one to forge that relationship and approach them first. If you're a teacher listening to this, thank you for caring. It makes a difference in our families. My guest on today's show is Melissa Madison. Melissa is an early learning teacher who specializes in both literacy and numeracy. She loves to dive into the science of reading and other research-based practices that best support all of her learners, but especially those with neurodivergent brains. She also serves as a member of the Surrey School District's Mentorship Advisory Team and is an active mentor with a focus on supporting and advocating for Surrey's early career teachers. Melissa is a dedicated and enthusiastic educational leader who has held many diverse roles in both the Surrey School District and the Greater Victoria School District. These various positions stretch more than 15 years' experience, has given her a unique lens which to evaluate the strengths and stretches of our public school system. She is also a proud mom to a larger-than-life 7.5-year-old daughter and full-heartedly embraces this title more than any other on her resume. And full disclosure, she doesn't know I'm going to say this.
Oh, no.
But she is also, or was also, Owen's grade 2 teacher. And she was one of the first that believed in my wife and I, gave us information that we didn't consider, and validated us. And we are forever grateful. Melissa, welcome to the Advocateurs.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Same here. Let's give our audience the background for the episode. There was a thread on a Facebook group about teachers raising. How does a teacher raise a prospect of a child possibly having a possibility of a diagnosis? And there was plenty of teachers that weighed in and made a strong show of support, pointing out that they're not allowed to diagnose kids. But it really begged the question of what can parents do and or say, and what can teachers do and or say. So Melissa and I, we basically thought it would be a great conversation where we could give practical advice and tips on this process, lay out some realities for both parties as we sit here and try and help kids. So the overall goal of the episode is to give parents and teachers practical tips on how a conversation can be started if they suspect that their child or student may have a disability. That's it.
Oh.
So I wanted to take you back in time for a second. And what do you remember when myself, my wife, and I had our first parent-teacher conference with O, and what were your impressions of Siobhan and me when we started talking about things? Because what I remember was that you had asked us to have the meeting, and then we went there, but yeah, I was curious to know what your impressions were of how we handled things, because I know that for us, there was already so much on our minds. We didn't know. But what do you recall?
Honestly, I think I was really excited initially was kind of my first impression, because both you and Siobhan were advocates, and I could see that right away. You were knowledgeable. You were clearly very present in your parenting to be able to notice the things that you had already noticed about Owen. And so I remember thinking, okay, I've gauged this. I can sense the attitudes. I can sense the belief systems that are kind of within your family. And I felt really positive, because I went, this is a family who's going to listen. This is a family who understands what's happening and is just as curious as I am about some of the behaviors that we were seeing. And I remember when I was able to kind of give you examples of the way that Owen, the way his brain worked through communication, when he was trying to express his ideas and things like that. And I remember giving you examples how his mind worked like a mind map, and how he'd have these kind of main ideas, and they all web into each other. And from the outside, you could not see the webbing. So it looked very like all over the place, but all of it made so much sense to him communicating these things to us.
Yeah.
And I remember you were like, that's bang on. That's exactly it. And I remember just feeling, just excitement to know that I would be working with true partners in the hopes of supporting Owen best that we could, and kind of digging in a little bit deeper to what was going on neurologically for him.
Yeah. And it was funny because that mind mapping, I remember the mind mapping conversation. And even this morning, he's got a thing on his foot right now, and we've got different color band-aids. And yesterday he had a blue band-aid. This morning he chose yellow. And the reason that he chose it was because he wanted to have a green lightsaber. And because we've been watching Clone Wars, Star Wars, he's like, well, that's going to be this Jedi's lightsaber. And I'm like, how the hell is anybody supposed to know this stuff? And like, because red and yellow, because yellow and blue make green, Dad. I mean,
Obviously,
don't you know this? and it's Yoda's lightsaber. Like, okay. And half the time, this stuff comes right out of the blue, and you're just like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, I remember being relieved as well. And even when we went home afterwards, it was like, I just looked at my wife, and Siobhan and I were just like, I feel relief because somebody actually gets it. And it was nice because your background allowed us to bounce off questions. And I think I remember saying, because I say it to a lot of people, is I need to ask you the wrong question. I just don't know if it's right now. And I'll just, if I'm asking it the wrong way, just tell me, or if I've offended, tell me. But, being able to have that safe person to bounce those things off of, and to have someone that sees what you see, was incredibly validating. It really was. So yeah, it was nice because the timing couldn't have been any better, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I would agree. And I experienced that relief as well. That's a perfect word for it.
Yeah.
Because I think, over my career, you don't always have meetings that go like that. And, teachers have to work so diligently on building tact and gentleness in their communication, right? Because we naturally want to protect our kids, and we can be defensive, and we can, denial is a very comfy place to live, I think, a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
We, as humans, we don't like being uncomfortable, right? So yeah, having your openness and all of that. And I always kind of, my philosophy, because I've taught K through 5 in terms of investment in those grades over years. And when I switched from kindergarten to grade 2, my internal motto was the idea that no one falls through the cracks after me. Like, I'm their last catch before the fall.
I think I remember you saying this to us.
Mm-hmm. And it's so important, because I think a lot of the time, when kids enter kindergarten, we give them so much grace, right?
Yeah.
And as we should, right? Kindergarten is a huge undertaking for a 4 or 5-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And development is different for every child, and so there's a lot of grace in kindergarten that we extend to our learners, because there's so much going on for them. So when we notice these behaviors, we may or may not bring it up to parents, but it usually ends up being like, well, let's give them another year.
But it's interesting, because the two questions I have, I wrote down the first one because I'll come back to it. But you're talking about that grace, and I've seen, I mean, at our school, and actually not just our school, I've seen it in a bunch of schools where teachers and administrators will basically say, I get that kindergarten's a tough year. That makes sense. But I think with us, we and our parents like us, or families like us, there might be a little bit of an exception to the rule of, there are things that we were seeing that we've just seen since birth. And we're just like, no, I don't want to I don't want to see the grace side of things. I want, there is something there.
Yeah.
And I remember we talked about dyslexia. And it was just like, if we had gone back and if we could go back in time and sort of pick that out of kindergarten, we could have said, there might have been something. I don't know if it would have started a different ball rolling, but I think for the most part that was sort of just kind of missed because it wasn't fully on the radar, but it was like just off, not like just off, just before the peripheral ends, just there. But the fact that I really love how you said, no one falls through the cracks after me. I think it's a big deal because sometimes you just need to get that ball rolling and you need to sort of put that foot down and say, look, there is something more here. It may not necessarily change. Here's the other question I was going to ask you. Did I ever come across, Siobhan's a bit different because I'm the extrovert and I'm both. I'm far more loud than my wife. But did I ever come across as pushy, or maybe pushy is the word, or did I become that not I don't want to say that parent because I take that as a compliment. And I know I can be that parent.
We can all be that parent.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it should be a good thing. But was there I guess what I'm saying is there a line where do you ever felt like I ever crossed a line in terms of being overly pushy or something else?
Never. I honestly, and not just because, we have a positive relationship.
Yeah.
But I would just say that you were just so engaged, and there is no fault in engaged parents, right? And so for me, I would rather have parents that are engaged and wanting to meet and wanting to talk at dismissal and wanting to have conversations than parents who sit on the sideline and wait to be contacted if there's a problem. I would much rather a proactive approach. And so no, I don't see it as pushy. And I think too that you tread a beautiful line between advocacy and also respect, right? So I never felt like I was in a position where I needed to defend my knowledge or that my observations were unfounded in some way. And so I think because that was established, there was no way for me to fairly view you as being pushy or being, quote, that parent. For me, it was like, oh, great, Mark's here. I can tell him about this amazing thing that Owen said today. Or, great, I saw this really interesting thing happen during play today, and I want to share that with him. So knowing that was established early on was so key for us, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I do try to walk that line very, very, very respectfully and very carefully because I don't necessarily know what the other person's gone through or what what's the word? What their lived experience is. And I was just figuring things out back then too. And that was about as I don't know. I was gonna say that was about as your emotions on your sleeve kind of moment as you could. But I just remember just being very excited that we had someone that we could sit there and bounce this stuff off of because I know it's tough for me to find someone that can reciprocate that amount of energy and that amount of knowledge back to me the way that I do for them. And that can be overwhelming for people. It can be, it can turn people off. Just sometimes the amount of over energy you bring to something because you want to sit there and see that change. It's like, okay, you have to figure out how to sort of dial it back and then, when to dial it up at the right times. And that's not easy. It's hard. No, it's hard.
It takes a lot of practice, right? And different personalities. And you're not guaranteed someone every year that's going to have the same energy levels as you, or someone who, is interested in the same things that you are. regarding your child and things like that, right? So I think there is a certain amount of luck that does go with the
Yeah,
parent-teacher relationship.
100%.
It's no different than when we work in an office, or I work in a school. There's teachers that I absolutely jive with, that I'm like, hey, this is kindred spirit,
Yeah.
awesome. And then I go, okay, and you know what? This person's, their methodology is very different than mine. Their pedagogy around certain things is different than mine. That's okay. I respect them, but that's not someone I'm necessarily going to dive deep into a conversation with regarding our differences in pedagogy,
Yeah.
right? So I think that
Yeah.
there's, we're everywhere. We always are constantly dealing with people that maybe we don't jive with as well. And then people that we do. And so I think to be able to just, hold gratitude for when you do have those moments where you connect with someone and it benefits the children.
Well, and something interesting that you said is that I think it's um, the way that a teacher is trained, I guess, and depending on what school that teacher may have gone to, that might have instilled them with specific values. And if they don't have necessarily the lived experience, that may very well create a big, huge set of blind spots. And they're dyslexic, no big deal. Well, no, actually, it is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just gloss or pass something over like that,
Yeah.
uh, let alone with any of the other disabilities. But I like how you phrased it like that, because I think it's a good thing. There's a practical tip right there. And I know I wrote that in my notes to you. It's knowing knowing just what the background of somebody is, and
Mhm.
maybe, granted, we don't know always where, what the training is like that you receive, but having a sense of what that background may be, because part of I know part of your background was autism as well. Like, that made a difference because we could sit there and say, I could push that question onto you, and it was a safe way for me to do it. Whereas someone that doesn't sort of have it, I think it's a bit harder to sit there and do, and then you have to hope that you guys can have that conversation. How important is it, in your opinion, for parents to ask, what background a teacher has outside of education or part of it?
So I think that, we have to be careful, when we do this, because I feel like teaching is one of the few careers where our expertise is um, used against us in some way. Like I have that an example, like, do you ask your dentist what additional training they have when they're discussing an obvious cavity in your mouth, right? It's something to think about. Do you sure, you might go to a doctor and get a second opinion from another doctor, but rarely are you going, this expert is wrong in what they're saying, right? You
Yeah,
usually accept what they have to say, and if you want a second opinion, obviously go ahead, and that's totally fine. But for whatever reason, teachers are not extended that same respect. We go through a tremendous amount of education to become teachers. We have degrees. Many teachers have multiple degrees. Many have master's degrees, extra certificate programs and things under their belts um, that just don't seem to be important to the general public.
yeah.
Our degree hanging on the wall doesn't hold the same merit as a doctor's degree hanging on the wall. And so, is it important to know what the background is of a teacher? Sure, depending on how you use it. If you use it to not validate what the teacher is saying, then that obviously is problematic. But if you're using it just out of curiosity, like, okay, oh wow, there's a huge connection point, because let's say this teacher also has a child with autism at home. Okay, well now we're connecting on a parent to parent level instead of just teacher to parent level, right? So these things are helpful. But I mean, ultimately, we need to understand that teachers are educated human beings in a profession, and that we, just like every other human, we have our own set of strengths and interests on top of those foundational skills that come out of university coursework, right? And
Yeah.
our practicums and things like that. So, as part of our teacher mandate, we have to participate in constantly evolving professional development. But we hold the autonomy to be able to choose what that professional development actually is.
Yeah.
So if someone has an affinity towards neurodivergent children and learning about dyslexia, then they can take Pro D on that. And that's awesome. So now they've got a bolstered understanding of an interest topic that then serves you particularly. But what if I wasn't super interested in that? I felt like I had enough of a grasp of all of that from my coursework in university, but I was super interested in inquiry and how inquiry can enhance, the educational experience for kids. Though that
And
might not directly serve you in the conversation about your child's neurodivergence, but that's what I'm interested in, and that will help other children who thrive in an inquiry-based program, right? So I think we have to be, just mindful not to use a teacher's background or areas of interest against them as a way to demerit
mm,
their observations and things like that. But if we're using it as a way to connect or just gain background information about the person we're having a conversation with,
yeah.
then that's super fair.
Well, and just to back up just a tiny bit, the one term you were saying when you said Pro D, you meant like I know you meant
Right.
professional development
Yes.
days. We just know them as Pro D days.
Hmm.
And in many of the school districts, you can choose to do certain what's the word? You can choose to do certain courses and such that the school district may put together a special guest speaker, and you can go attend and learn more. And that's what the Pro D. I think Pro Ds are absolutely awesome for that stuff. They're really good, and I know in Surrey's case, just some of the people that they've had through are just fantastic. So
Mhm.
I'm a big believer in it. What the the thing that I thought about when you were telling me this was, if the teacher doesn't have the background, then, whether they do or do not, it might be irrelevant. It might be a case of just kind of recognizing what role maybe a teacher wants to play as well.
Mhm.
And if the teacher doesn't, let's say, they don't have a background in anything neurodiverse related, well, maybe they have to connect with the with LST. And I
Mhm.
totally forgot what LST's what it meant.
Learning support
Learning
teacher.
support teacher.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just
And then
blanked
there's
out on my own brain there.
no, that's
But
okay. And then we have IST as well, which is integration support teacher.
yeah,
Mhm.
and I think maybe connecting, making a point of connecting with those or having that person, because I know the ones for our schools, I think they have reached out to parents probably before and they've acted as that intermediary. So it's a nice little way to have that. It's again, it's not using the education or your experience against you. It's just a way of saying, you know what, I think there's somebody else that might be able to help you better than this. And
Absolutely.
that's probably a good idea. And I mean, you can even go through probably the principal on that one too, I think, or the VP if you've got
Mhm.
a VP,
And
if you've
and
got a
I
vice principal in your school.
Absolutely. I think too that, the wonderful thing about school systems in general is that if you're not an expert in something, there is someone who is, and we have access to those people. Whether it's, district staff and helping teachers to have expertise in certain areas, whether it's your principal who's been teaching for so long before they became administration, whether it's the teacher next door who has a passion for X, Y, or Z, right? So there's always an expert available. And so if a classroom teacher doesn't necessarily know enough about something yet to offer solid advice or answers that you might be looking for, as long as that teacher remains curious and open to finding out and exploring more about those things to serve you and to serve the learner in their class, then I don't think the background matters so much, right? Like I think about like even just myself as a parent, right? Did I know how to care for a newborn when my daughter was born? No, I learned on the way, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we're constantly evolving as parents, as humans, as professionals, and so, knowing what I know now, even about my own daughter, or about students that I teach year to year, that didn't just happen overnight the
No.
minute I hung up my, Bachelor of Education degree, right?
Yeah.
That came from further curiosities, from student situations that I faced for the first time that I needed to explore more about, right? So
Yeah.
doing our own research, looking into things, talking to the experts, all of that is a part of the process too, right? So we can't say, oh, because you don't know about that, your opinion isn't valid here.
Yeah.
It's as long as the teacher is open to
Well,
exploring, to hearing more.
for the sake of time, we're going to take a pause, and in the next episode, Melissa and I are going to discuss declaring why I don't know is a good thing and what avenues can you go down. Being specific about the questions that you're seeking an answer to, the importance of listening and its role for both parents and teachers, defining the role of a teacher, and the pressure on parents to be experts teaching kids after school is done. I hope you're able to take away some solid advocacy tips from what you've heard so far. See you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to our show.
One of the things that we love about Owen is how literal he is. There was a joke that we used to say to him that he would never understand. He does now, so he catches it. But we would tell him, "Hey, Owen, can you hold your horses?" And then he'd go, "I don't have any horses, Dad." Now when we try to tell him this joke, he just catches us and he's like, "That doesn't work on me anymore." If you're hearing this message, you've reached the end of the episode, and for that, I want to say thank you. I hope you have enjoyed what you've heard and are walking away with newfound knowledge.
We are the ADHD Family.
See you soon for a new episode. I have 3 things to ask of you. Number 1, if you have any comments, questions, or guest ideas, please leave a comment on the Facebook page. Number 2, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps people find us. And number 3, if you want to be a guest on the show or know someone who would make a great guest, contact me through our Facebook page. This podcast is open to everyone. You don't need to be an expert, just passionate and want to see change. The opinions expressed by the host and guest are not associated with any employer or organization unless otherwise stated. Any medical information on this site and podcast is provided as an information resource only and is not to be used or relied on for any diagnostic or treatment purposes. This information does not create any patient-physician relationship and should not be used as a substitute for a professional diagnosis and treatment. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any healthcare decisions or guidance about a specific medical condition. The show, host, and its guests expressly disclaim responsibility and shall have no liability for any damages, loss, injury, or liability whatsoever suffered as a result of your reliance on the information contained in this site or show. By visiting this site and listening to this show, you agree to the terms and conditions, which may from time to time change or be supplemented by the show host.